The scent of hazelnut coffee had just begun to fill the kitchen. A quiet ritual I cherished more than I let on. My robe was still wrapped tightly around me, slippers soft against the tile. The house silent, except for the occasional ping from my phone. I scrolled through messages from my walking group. Marlene had already sent a weather update and a meme about hip replacements that made me chuckle, just as I clicked on a new video from my granddaughter Lila. The front door opened. Jeremy didn't knock. He never did anymore. He entered soaked from the rain, tracking wet footprints across the hardwood without so much as a glance at the mat. Tasha trailed behind, eyes fixed on her phone, fingernails clacking against the screen like she was typing out national secrets. She didn't greet me. I don't know if she even noticed me. I turned back to the kettle, pretending not to feel the shift in the air. Jeremy shrugged off his jacket, shook out his damp hair, and leaned against the counter like it was his. "Tasha's moving in on Friday," he said flatly, "and you're covering her lifestyle. Half her expenses. At least." I stirred my coffee. The spoon moved slowly, deliberately. I didn't look up. Half of what? Exactly. He sighed, as if I were the one making things complicated. "You've got 2 spare rooms. It makes sense. She needs space, and we can't afford to give her what she needs in our place right now." I glanced over. Tasha still hadn't looked up from her phone. She wore a sweatshirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill and leggings that didn't look like they'd ever touched a gym. And by needs, you mean, self-care things, basic comforts. It's not extravagant. "Mom?" He laughed softly, like he was explaining simple math. "She'll be good company for you." Company. I took my mug and stepped toward the table. Jeremy followed, undeterred. "You've got the space. You're retired. You shouldn't be alone." I sipped the coffee slowly. It had gone lukewarm, but I didn't flinch. I simply held his gaze and said, "We'll talk specifics later." Jeremy nodded, assuming victory, and moved to the hallway. Tasha finally looked up and smiled, polite, distant, hollow. She handed me a neatly folded sheet of paper. The paper was thick, printed on ivory stock with a faint floral watermark. Tasha always had a flair for presentation. At the top, centered and in bold, it read, "Transition Essentials." I didn't sit down. I held it in one hand while balancing my coffee in the other. The list was numbered clean, organized, rehearsed. Weekly massages, a premium hair salon, high-end gym membership, monthly wardrobe refresh, and a rotating subscription to skincare boxes that cost more than I spent on groceries in a week, a cleaning service to ease her adjustment, a meal plan, of course, holistic therapy sessions for balance. "She needs to feel supported," Jeremy said. "We're not asking for the whole thing, just half." A gesture. Really, a gesture. I repeated. My eyes never left the page. Tasha leaned one elbow on the kitchen island, her phone finally tucked away. "It's nothing too extravagant, just basic needs. Really. I mean, you understand what it's like to be a woman. We don't just wake up like this." She smiled again, wide and porcelain white. It reminded me of an actress delivering her best line on a second-rate soap. I noticed how her nails matched her lipstick exactly, how her perfume lingered too long in the air, too sharp, too sweet. Jeremy chimed in again, like he could sense I was teetering. "And she'll help you out around the house, keep you company. You've said how quiet it gets in here sometimes." I placed the list on the counter gently, as if it might shatter. "I'll think about it." Tasha's smile didn't falter, but her eyes flickered just once. Jeremy nodded, satisfied, and glanced at the time like he had somewhere better to be. They didn't stay much longer. He kissed my cheek without feeling, and she offered a wave that didn't quite reach her shoulder. When the door clicked shut behind them, I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink and reached for my reading glasses. I wanted to look at that list again. This time, slowly. This time, as a warning. The list sat on the table like a forgotten invitation to a party I was never meant to enjoy. I folded it in half, then again into quarters, and set it beside the sugar jar. My hands moved automatically, but my mind had already wandered somewhere else backward. When Tom died, Jeremy was only 11. The house felt too quiet for a long time after that. I remember sitting at the edge of his bed, pretending to read while he lay beside me. Wide awake and refusing to cry, I took a second job at the library's outreach center, shelving books at night and leading literacy groups on Saturdays. It barely paid enough, but it kept us afloat and gave me the illusion of control. I told Jeremy that things would be fine. He believed me because I said it like I believed it. 2, he got his degree, graduated with honors. I helped with the student loans until he landed a job. When he and Tasha announced their engagement, I cashed out a small retirement fund I'd built from 20 years of after-hours tutoring. He never asked for it. I never told him how long it took to build, just handed it over with a smile and told them to enjoy their honeymoon. 3 years ago, when his company downsized, he called me late one night, voice cracking under the weight of pride. I didn't let him finish. I wired rent for 4 months and paid Tasha's dental bill without blinking. I told him it was nothing, that I was happy to help. He said I was a saint. I said I was a mother. Now there was a list, with monthly dues, like I was a membership service. I stared out the window at the backyard Tom and I had built brick by brick, dollar by dollar, while Jeremy rode his bike on the sidewalk. I whispered it aloud, to no one but myself. I never asked for anything back. The wind shifted slightly outside. My hand moved to my phone. I opened Marlene's message thread and typed just 2 words, "You home." Marlene opened her door before I'd even knocked. She must have seen me through the window. Her robe was mismatched, coffee still in hand, and her hair pinned up like she'd wrestled with it and lost. I held up the folded list, and she stepped aside without a word. She didn't need an explanation. She knew that look in my eyes. I laid the paper out on her kitchen table. Her lips curled into something between disbelief and fury. "You've got to be kidding me. A personal stylist, weekly spa treatments. Who does she think you are? Cher." I laughed, but it came out bitter and soft. Marlene didn't. She pressed her hand over mine. "Nora, you're not lonely. You're being cornered." The quiet between us thickened. I stared down at Tasha's demands and thought of the backyard again. The one Tom had landscaped himself one summer because we couldn't afford a contractor. "I need to know what my rights are," I said, without pause. Marlene walked to her cupboard, flipped through a stack of business cards she kept with old warranty slips, and handed one to me. "Blake Rivers, elder and estate law. Call him? He helped my cousin last year when her nephew tried to force her into a retirement condo. Smart guy. Doesn't talk down to you." That afternoon, I sat in Blake's office, clean lines, a quiet clock ticking, and sunlight filtered through blinds. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with kind eyes and a clipped way of speaking that made it easy to listen. I told him everything, from the list to the veiled threats. He nodded as I spoke, jotting occasional notes, asking for my address and property info. "You own the home outright," he said, pulling it up. "No cosigners, no liens. If someone wants to move in, they need your written permission, legally. You're secure." Relief fluttered across my chest, brief and shallow. Then he frowned. "Wait, there's a change in the deed here. 3 years ago, after your husband passed." My breath caught. "What kind of change?" He turned the monitor toward me, scrolling slowly. Someone added a secondary name to the title. "Do you recall signing that?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. No. Blake clicked through a few more screens, his brow tightening. It's right here, he said, pointing. Jeremy Whitmore, added as joint owner via quitclaim deed, dated March 17th, 3 years ago. March 17th, that was 2 weeks after Tom's funeral. I remembered the ache in my chest, the way I'd gone days without eating real food, surviving off toast and instant coffee. I'd barely spoken to anyone except Lila over the phone. I couldn't even find the strength to pack up Tom's slippers from beside the bed. I don't remember signing anything like that, I murmured. Blake looked up carefully. It happens more often than it should. A lot of people in grief sign forms without realizing what they're giving away. But if you didn't sign this knowingly, I didn't. I cut in. I would have remembered. Then it's fraud, he said, calm but clear. Even if your signature is real? If he misled you or didn't fully disclose what you were signing, that's grounds to challenge it. I stared at Jeremy's name on the screen. It looked wrong. Out of place. Like graffiti on a church wall. That name didn't belong there. Not beside mine. Not without permission. Blake leaned back in his chair. We'll need to get a copy of the original filing. If he slipped it in among other documents, estate paperwork. Maybe that's especially serious. You were grieving. The courts take that into account. Grieving didn't even begin to cover it. I couldn't remember half of that month. I didn't go to the grocery store alone for nearly 6 weeks. I'd let Jeremy handle the paperwork because I trusted him. Because he said he'd take care of everything. And he had, just not for me. I folded my hands together in my lap to keep them from shaking. What can I do? Blake's voice softened. We can fight it. But we'll need documentation. Records. Anything that shows you didn't agree to this knowingly. We'll also file to stop any further property actions until it's settled. I nodded. I could feel something hardening inside me. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of quiet steel. I left the office with instructions and a list of documents to gather. At home, I stood in the hallway, staring at the photo of Jeremy on graduation day. The locksmith came on a Wednesday, a young man with kind eyes and no questions. He changed the locks on the front, side, and back doors in under an hour. I thanked him, paid in cash, and asked him to hand me the old keys like they were relics. When he left, I dropped them into a small tin Tom used to keep spare screws in and tucked it in the back of the closet. By Thursday morning, I had filed the complaint with Blake's help. Fraud, unauthorized change of deed, abuse of trust during bereavement. The language sounded sterile, too clean for the betrayal it described. Still, Blake was steady, methodical. He said the injunction would be ready by Friday morning. The restraining order was provisional, but enforceable. Jeremy and Tasha would have to wait for a judge to decide. They couldn't cross my threshold without my permission, not anymore. They're arriving with boxes, I told Marlene over coffee. And I'll be waiting with paper. She smiled without humor. They won't know what hit them. The rest of that day passed in odd stillness. I stripped the bed in the guest room, the one they'd claimed washed the sheets, and packed up the photo albums I kept in there. I moved them into my bedroom, then stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the patch of sunlight that always fell across the floor around 2 in the afternoon. Tom had once joked it was the only spot in the house warm enough for both of us. That night, I laid out my documents like armor, deed copies, bank statements, screenshots of text messages. The list Tasha had given me, still crisp and folded. I tucked everything into a folder and placed it beside my handbag. At 5 the next morning, I was already dressed. The same burgundy blouse I wore the day I retired. It still fit. I reheated coffee and waited. My hand didn't tremble when I sipped. The clock ticked toward 8, outside. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the porch. Inside, I sat in my chair, facing the door, At exactly 8 o'clock, the rumble of a truck pulled into my driveway. I didn't stand. I'd already positioned myself in the living room, where I could see through the sheer curtains without being seen. The vehicle was enormous, far too large for a couple of weekend bags. This was meant to be permanent. Tasha stepped down first, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, her glossy hair pulled into a high knot. She clutched a designer tote in one hand and a phone in the other, already filming, like she was arriving at a vacation rental. Jeremy followed, walking with the confidence of someone who thought the future belonged to him. He reached for the doorknob. I watched him hesitate as his hand touched metal. He jiggled the handle once, twice, then fumbled for the key. It slid in, but the lock didn't turn. I heard the first sharp knock echo through the house. Then another, louder, Mom Jeremy's voice. Something's wrong with the lock? Something's right with it, I thought. Tasha stepped forward and began pacing, muttering about unprofessional behavior and ungrateful people. She kicked one of her own boxes. At 8:15, the officer pulled up in a black and white patrol SUV, crisp uniform and clipboard in hand, calm and unhurried. I recognized him from Blake's firm assigned for this very purpose. He approached Jeremy with the cool detachment of someone who had done this a dozen times before. Mr. Jeremy Whitmore. Jeremy blinked, surprised. "Yeah, you've been served," the officer said, extending a sealed envelope. "Fraud. Attempted unlawful occupancy. You are not permitted to enter the premises. This injunction is effective immediately." "What? Are you kidding me?" Jeremy's voice cracked. Tasha spun around. "What does that even mean? I already booked the truck. I scheduled movers. I gave notice at our place." "You're trespassing," the officer replied. Tasha started screaming. About the truck. About me. About her rights. Jeremy stood frozen, staring at the papers. I stayed seated behind the curtain, watching with steady breath. Marlene stood beside me now, silent and strong, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. We didn't speak. The noise outside continued, but the silence inside was complete. He came back that evening, alone this time. No truck, no wife, no arrogance, just Jeremy, holding a manila folder in both hands like a peace offering. His face was pale, eyes puffy. He asked if we could talk. I let him in. He sat on the edge of the couch, hunched over like a boy waiting for punishment. "I messed up," he said. "I got scared. I thought, if I just fixed our finances quietly, you wouldn't have to worry. I didn't mean for it to get like this. You forged your way into owning half my home?" I said quietly. That wasn't fear. That was theft. He didn't argue. For once, he had no excuses left. "I want to make it right," he said. "Really? I'll do whatever it takes." I slid a contract across the table, drawn up by Blake. It listed the full repayment amount, $783,000. Divided monthly, 13 years, no early forgiveness, no skipped months, no access to my accounts. I expect $5,000 on the first of every month. I told him, miss a payment, we go to court. He stared at it, blinking fast. 13 years, I'll be in my 40s. I'll be 81. He swallowed hard. Can't we just go back to being mother and son? I looked at him, this man I had raised, fed, sheltered, and now held legally accountable. When you act like a son, I said. Maybe I'll remember how to be your mother. He signed. I watched his pen move across the paper, steady but slow. When he slid the folder back toward me, I saw something flicker in his eyes, not just regret. Maybe understanding. Or maybe it was just the first installment of the price he finally had to pay. It's been 6 months since the truck rolled away and the screaming stopped. The deed is back in my name entirely. Blake handled everything with grace and steel. The fraudulent claim was voided. The court documents signed and sealed. Jeremy hasn't missed a payment yet. $5,000 arrives like clockwork. On the first of every month. Direct deposit with no note attached. I don't expect one. The house feels quiet now, but it's not empty. My walking group meets here on Tuesdays before our morning laps around the lake. What started as a few older women sharing health tips has become something else, entirely a kind of movement. We swap stories about our children, our money, our boundaries. We share what we were never taught, how to say no without guilt. I started a blog. Just for us. After 60 we choose. I write in the mornings, usually from the sunroom. It's modest, nothing viral, but the comments from women across the country are anything but small. They remind me that clarity is contagious, that dignity, once spoken aloud, multiplies. Isabel, my granddaughter, called me last week. She's applying to pre-law programs. I want to help women like you, she said. I told her I hoped she would help women like herself before they forget their worth. As for Jeremy, he brings the kids on Sundays, drops them off at the curb, doesn't come in, not yet. I told him once the contract's paid, we can talk, not sooner. Some evenings, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea and let the air settle around me. There's no noise from another room. No footsteps I didn't agree to, just the creak of wood, the scent of lavender, and the hum of my own life unshared, unshaken. And finally, wholly mine. I raised a son, not an heir to my labor. I protected a home, not just bricks and beams. And I defended a woman I forgot to care for me. For years, I told myself that love meant sacrifice, that motherhood meant surrender. I was wrong. Love without respect is exploitation, and motherhood without boundaries becomes a burden no one admits to carrying. They called me stubborn, cold, difficult, but I have never felt warmer in my own skin or clearer in my own mind. Every wall in this house stands because I refused to crumble. Every quiet morning is proof that silence can be chosen, not imposed. To anyone reading this who has been dismissed, overlooked, or used, you don't owe your life to anyone who sees you as a convenience. So I ask you now, have you ever been treated like a backup plan in your own home? When did family become entitlement? And how long will you wait before you choose yourself?